Yo, what is going on, guys? It's Cbrev. Welcome to, I guess, our first video for MLB The Show 22. We are on the tech test right now. Wanted to make this video to go over some of the gameplay changes that I have noticed while playing on the tech test and give my thoughts on them. Remember, this is just a technical test. This is not the final product for the game at all, but there are some pretty significant gameplay changes that I'm excited to go over. So this video structure, we're going to go over the major points. There's one for pitching, two for hitting, and then at the end, I'm going to go over a little bit more anecdotal stuff that I've seen so far. Again, we're very early on, but just some things I've noticed. And if you guys notice, there's a watermark over the screen. This is how it works for everyone on the tech test. Apologies if that gets in the way of some of the stuff I'm trying to show. But first off, let's start with pitching, and the major one is the changes in par size as you go to different areas of the strike zone. And also, in general, it seems like par sizes are a bit higher this year, or a bit wider. The range is bigger. That's, again, a little bit anecdotal, but I have kind of noticed that. Would be a decent change because Pinpoint was super easy to dot with last year. A little more RNG could help with that. But anyway, the major change is that it appears on breaking pitches and sinkers. The par actually grows if you throw them high. So if you guys don't know what the par is, because I see some people ask about this, it's the circle around where the ball's gonna land, and that circle basically indicates the range where the ball could end up if you get a perfect release. So if I throw this slider perfectly, it's gonna land anywhere in this circle, and obviously the bigger the circle, the more RNG with the pitch, and the smaller the circle, the more accurate you're gonna be. But the change this year, which I think is a really good change, I'll give my opinion on it in a second, but breaking pitches and sinkers, pitches that traditionally should not be thrown up, actually have a much larger par size when they're thrown up. So this increases the randomness of a pitch and also increases the chance that this pitch will end up in a bad spot and end up hanging and getting crushed. So as a better example, with Chris Bassett's sinker, which has much better control than his slider, you can see kind of the area of the par when I throw the sinker low compared to the area of the par when I throw the sinker high. Very noticeable difference in growth. The high sinker is going to have a lot more randomness to it. Now, as I said earlier, my opinion on this, I think this is a great change. This is actually a genius way to kind of, give a little bit of a nerf to Pinpoint. I imagine it works this way with meter as well. And you guys know me, I'm the first person to throw breaking pitches up in the zone. If you guys watch me pitch with Valenzuela, it's kind of crazy how often I threw breaking pitches high. But if we're being honest, these pitches should not be thrown high very often, and you kind of got away with that because of, the game mechanics and the fact that it was a video game. So this honestly just punishes a little bit harder on pitches that are thrown in locations that traditionally they would not be thrown. This obviously is not going to prevent people or stop people from throwing high sinkers consistently. It's also not going to stop people from throwing breaking pitches up in the zone. But what it is going to do is give you as the batter a better chance to get a mistake pitch when they choose to throw that pitch. If we pretend we have a right-handed batter in the zone, I could throw this sinker up and in, which is a very popular pitch last year, every year for that matter. And I could choose to do that, and I could end up dotting it right on the corner, and it'd be basically an impossible pitch to hit. But with the increase in par size, that pitch could also end up pretty much right down the middle. As opposed to if you look at this sinker and I try to throw it down and in, there's a lot less chance that it ends up, more towards the middle, and it's actually not going to end up directly middle. So big change. I really like this. It's going to make pitching a little bit more predictable, which I guess is a good thing from a hitter's perspective. And I love the fact that sinkers are included in this along with breaking pitches, since high sinkers are, a popular pitch every single year. Interesting to note as well, the cutter does not have its par size increase. So high cutters aren't really as big of an issue as high sinkers have been in years past, but just to show you, the par size does not change on a cutter. This obviously also applies to a four-seam fastball. It's not going to change. So high cutters are still just as accurate as low cutters. All right, I went back and watched this part of the video last time, and I didn't explain it very well. So I'm just going to quickly go over some minor Pinpoint pitching changes that I've noticed on the tech test. It's very small, but it is technically a nerf to Pinpoint pitching, and I don't know if I'll be able to replicate it while I'm throwing these pitches, but the way it started out last year when Pinpoint first came out, and if you notice, that first pitch I threw had 3 degrees left and it was marked as yellow, which is non-perfect. That's kind of what I'm talking about. When Pinpoint pitching first came out last year, the threshold for perfect release was 0.05 seconds timing, or 5 degrees directionally or less was considered perfect. They ended up nerfing that in the middle of the year and lowered it to 3 for each, so now 0.03 On MLB 21, 0.03 for timing or 3 degrees for direction is still considered perfect. You want that or less for a perfect release. On the tech test so far, you can see again 3 degrees left is marked as yellow or non-perfect, so it appears they've nerfed it slightly a little bit more, and the threshold for perfect now is 2 and not 3. So timing wise, you're gonna want 0.02 seconds or less, you know, being off, and you want 2 degrees or less directionally. So it's yet another nerf to Pinpoint. If you take the nerfs in total from the beginning of last year to the beginning of this year, a perfect release has gone from 0.05 of variance to 0.02, so a lot less leeway, and I do think it does help nerf it just a little bit, so a very small thing. Let's move on to hitting now, and they have actually changed it so that computer pitchers in practice mode throw pitches a lot faster, basically instantly, which I like a lot, but we're going to be seeing a lot of pitches come in as I try to explain some of the changes here, so bear with me. But there's a couple decently big changes that we've noticed in the tech test so far. The first one being what people are referring to as dynamic PCI, so this is another change that I really like. So last year they put out a patch which extended the PCI range, and they did this in order to allow people to actually get to the corner, because before that you couldn't actually get your PCI all the way to a corner, and people were spamming low sinkers with perfect releases, and it was pretty much impossible to square them up. So their resolution for that was to increase the PCI range in terms of the strike zone, but what ended up happening is it allowed people to reach a lot more balls and pitches that probably shouldn't be squared up. So the change they've implemented this year is that the PCI actually shrinks the farther you get outside of the strike zone. So this may be a little bit hard to see, especially with the pitches coming in, but I'm gonna do my best. So if you're in the strike zone, your PCI is a normal size, but as you increase the range at which you're swinging at a ball or how far you go outside the strike zone, your PCI is actually shrinking. So let me see if I can do this as the pitch is coming in really quick. You can see my PCI, and it does in fact dynamically shrink with how much farther I am outside the strike zone. We'll show that again. Hope you guys can see that. The farther outside the zone I go, the smaller my PCI gets. Now this is a good change. It's probably a needed change, but I'm gonna be perfectly honest with you guys, this probably won't change a whole lot. You guys can see my PCI size, and this is on Legend. You can imagine on All-Star how little of an effect this is gonna have. On All-Star, your PCI is so big anyway that having it shrink outside the zone, it's still gonna be decently big. The fact that you can still reach those pitches, I guess, is the biggest issue. So in terms of like nerfing hitting balls outside of the strike zone, I don't think it's going to have a huge impact. Could be wrong about that, but especially on lower difficulties, it's still going to be very easy to reach balls outside the strike zone and put a decent swing on them, especially if you have good timing. I don't really know what a good solution for that is. Obviously, we need to be able to reach the corners of the strike zone, and kind of the trade-off that we've had with that is the PCI range being way outside the zone now. I think this is a good start, but I just wanted to clarify that I think specifically on lower ratings like All-Star, this isn't going to have a huge impact. I think you're still going to be able to get to balls outside the strike zone and, you know, get hits on them pretty consistently. All right, so that's the dynamic PCI. As a summary, the PCI actually shrinks the farther outside the strike zone you get. You have a normal size PCI if you stay within the strike zone when you make contact with the pitch. And the final hitting change is something that you can activate by clicking down on the left stick, and this is the one everyone's talking about. This is super exciting. It's called PCI Anchor. So what this does is it allows you to pick one of 9 grid points to have your PCI default to, and it'll just stay there. So you can see I selected middle left, and now I'm not holding anything, but my PCI is starting middle left, and ironically he threw a pitch right at me there. So I'm not moving the stick. You guys can see that my thumb's not on it, and the PCI anchor is anchored to start in that area of the strike zone. Now this is great if you're anticipating your opponent's tendencies. You're trying to guess a pitch. Maybe they're throwing a lot of low and in sinkers, so you want to anchor your PCI low and in, and then that kind of helps you have better reaction time to go get that. Maybe your opponent is being cute and still throwing a lot of high off speed even with the par nerf, so you want to have your PCI default to middle up so you can crush that mistake pitch. You can do that as well. So it's great for your starting point for your PCI. I personally am still gonna manually start it inside. That's a change I made last year, so I'll still hold it inside like here. Because if you notice from the grid points, they don't actually reach that far, which I think is a good thing. I don't think you should have an anchor point like on the corner or anything. But you can't just like, you can't just anticipate a pitch up and away and then anchor up and away and expect to hit a pitch on the corner. You still have to move it a little bit, which is good. And so this is all the buzz. You know, the PCI Anchor determines where you can start your PCI. That's what most people are talking about, but nobody's talking about, I think, the biggest factor of why this will be successful and used a lot. Once you select an anchor for your PCI Anchor, it's actually anchored throughout the entire pitch. So this also applies to when the pitch is coming in. So what that means is, for a lot of players like myself, we've kind of learned over the years, you know, to prevent ourselves from dropping our PCI under pitches right down the middle. A common strategy that I use specifically is, if I think the pitch is coming in directly down the middle, I'll actually let go of the PCI entirely, because by default the PCI ends up middle, right? So if he throws me a hanging slider and I think it's going middle, then instead of trying to aim middle, I just let go of my PCI and it does it for me, right? Well, the anchor acts the same way, because not only is the anchor a starting point, but it's technically an ending point as the pitch is coming in. So one of the anchors I've been messing with, and obviously I don't know what the meta anchor is going to be, I don't know how often this is going to use, but one of the ones that really intrigued me was middle down, because me being trained to kind of let go of the PCI if I think the pitch is coming middle, I'd much rather have my PCI end up slightly below middle, and that helps me get a fly ball if the pitch is actually middle, if that makes sense. It lowers the chance that if they throw one right down the middle, that I end up hitting a ground ball. You know, obviously I want to get a pitch like that in the air. So I can anchor middle low. I can manually start my PCI inside, because that's what I like to do. And if the pitch looks like it's coming middle low, then I can just let go of the stick, and automatically my PCI is going to drop, you know, exactly there. So I think there's a lot to this. You know, letting go of the stick entirely as part of your PCI movement, I think, is a bigger deal than people think it is. And this can actually help you as well if there are like specific areas of the strike zone that you really struggle to get to. You could use this same tactic for something like if you're prone to dropping your PCI on pitches right down the middle. You could try to anchor like high. And so what happens is, when you go to drop your PCI, let's say I'm starting my PCI middle in, the pitch is coming in, you know, middle, but I drop like this, right? So this may be a common PCI movement, where I start middle, I see it coming here, then I drop way under. If you anchor your PCI high, before you make the drop, it's actually going to anchor higher than if you had the anchor right in the middle, right? So I go from here, and then if I let go of the stick, it ends up there, and that gives me less of an opportunity to jump way under the ball, because I'm only going to have, you know, a split second to move from where I let go of the stick to where the ball actually ends up. So that was a lot of explanation for the anchor, but I just wanted to stress how good I think it is for actually like letting go of the joystick as part of like aiming. And that's something that I haven't seen anybody else talk about. It's something that I do very often, and I'll definitely be using these anchors for that. But yeah, regardless, PCI Anchor, super cool, you know, in terms of where it starts and where it ends up, both very useful things. And so for the last part of this video, I'm going to show some clips of some swings I was taking in practice mode and give a little bit of anecdotal opinion on how I think hitting and, you know, pitching in general is feeling on the tech test so far. Okay, so just a couple anecdotal things that I've seen on the tech test so far. As far as pitch speeds, they do seem a little bit slower than last year, which is something I'm expecting them to make a change on. They were probably a little bit too fast, especially for the casual audience last year. All I've done is play offline so far, so that could be a factor, but they do feel a little bit slower. In addition, again, this is anecdotal, but line drives and ground balls specifically seem like they have a lot more oomph to them, like their exit velos are higher, or they just have less loft in them. Fly balls feel about the same, but you'll see in some of these clips, some of these line drives I'm hitting, and even ground balls through the infield, just seem like they move so fast towards the wall compared to last year. This is going to bode extremely well for contact hitting cards if this is true. But some of these line drives I'm hitting just seem like they move. And a lot of the issues last year with contact hitters is you'd hit a ball to the outfield and it would have too much loft, and even a bronze defended outfielder could run it down. A lot of these line drives that I've hit so far on the tech test, if it's a ball that I feel like I've really squared up well, you know, if it's hit decently well, even if it is just a line drive or just a ground ball, it seems like really well PCI hit balls that are line drives and ground balls seem to move towards the outfield a lot faster, and they seem to have a lot more oomph to them. So that's just something small that I think that I've noticed, and if this continues into the actual game, it's going to bode extremely well for contact hitters and stuff moving forward. All right, and that's gonna do it for the video. Would love to hear your guys' thoughts down in the comment section below on these gameplay changes, what you like, what you don't like, what you want them to change in addition to this stuff. Thanks so much for watching. It's only the beginning for MLB The Show 22. I'm so excited for this year. Take care, friends, and I'll see y'all in the next one.